He started to
Will the Senate please come to order?
No, I never said that. Not that I meant to, but it was in the deed.
Depending on who's in your audience. Maybe the parent of one of your kids. Yeah.
We will now return to where we left off, and I believe the senator from Chittenden, Senator Gulick, had some questions for the senator from Lamoille, Senator Westman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, indeed. My question has to do with Section 41 of the bill, and I want to thank the Senate Transportation Committee for dealing with the tinted windows issue, which is something that I've brought up many times in the past. My constituents who are cyclists and e-bikers and pedestrians are often scared when they're at an intersection and they can't see the driver and they can't make eye contact. It's a dangerous situation. So I really appreciate the work that they've done on that. My question had to do with the equipment that's used to measure the actual level of tintedness of a window. Last I knew, that equipment wasn't available at the state, and so that was an issue. So I'm wondering if the Transportation Committee might be able to comment on whether or not they've been able to get that equipment to use for measurement.
So this was an issue in the last couple of years in transportation. We went through all of this, and the cost is really not that great for the equipment to be able to measure. Part of the reason this hasn't gone into place is because of the rules process, and that's so lengthy. But I'm going to yield to the senator from Washington, who specifically was our expert on the committee dealing with this issue.
The senator from Lamoille yields to the senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's true that they don't have the equipment because even though any amount of window tinting is currently illegal, it was just any window tinting, so they didn't have to measure it. There are other states that have a legal limit on the amount of light transmission, do have little light transmission devices. You can buy them on Amazon. We looked it up in committee last year. It was like $49. They're not high-tech items, and other states use them. Some, like I think state troopers in New York carry them in their patrol cars. So there are easily, readily obtainable devices that they will have once the inspection manual gets updated.
I thank the senators. Thank you, Mr. President.
So the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of S-123. We now have S-122 on the calendar for action, introduced by the Committee on Economic Development on March 18, 2025. Affecting the revenues of the state, the bill was referred to the Committee on Finance, which recommends that the bill ought to pass.
Mr. President?
Yes, Senator from Chittenden.
I could ask for a brief recess. Chair of Appropriations is currently trying to determine a question about the downtown tax rate.
We will take a brief recess.
And windshield.
Never ride in a vehicle that
We have on the calendar for action S-122, introduced by the Committee on Economic Development on March 18th, 2025, affecting the revenues of the state. The bill was referred to the Committee on Finance, which recommends that the bill ought to pass. Affecting the appropriations of the state, the bill was referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which recommends that the bill be amended, and when so amended, that the bill ought to pass. Listen to the second reading of the bill.
S-122, an act relating to economic and workforce development.
I recognize the senator from Windsor, Senator Clarkson, for the explanation of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. This year's Senate Economic Development Bill, S-122, which you have on your desks, primarily focuses on increasing our support for Vermont's small business sector. House Commerce and Senate Economic Development had held an illuminating joint hearing earlier this year in January on issues concerning small businesses in Vermont. We heard how terrific the resources available to our entrepreneurs and small businesses are, and we heard what a difference they make in the success of these new business ventures. We also heard that the supports they're able to provide are restricted by their various capacities and by the financial resources that they are able to access. They could serve more entrepreneurs, more small businesses, more people in need if they had more financial support. So instead of creating new programs this year, we chose to invest further in what works already. So this is a bill that reinforces what already works and that we're very proud of. In addition, S-122 invests further in our very successful downtown and village tax credit program, in developing international trade opportunities, both to increase markets for Vermont manufacturers and to recruit companies in Asia and Europe to invest and expand here in Vermont. S-122 creates the Vermont-Ireland Trade Commission, our first ever state other country trade commission. And we create a task force to study the feasibility of creating a Vermont Convention Center and major performance venue. So, section 1, going through the bill, downtown and village tax credits. As many of you know, our downtown and village tax credit program is one of the most effective tools in our economic development toolbox for stimulating private investment, revitalizing our communities by supporting the rehabilitation of our older and historic buildings. Every one of our districts has benefited from the revitalization these tax credits have enabled. Vermont gets a big bang for its buck with this program, as it has a tremendous return on investment, leveraging $16 for every dollar invested. In the last 4 years alone, $21.2 million was awarded in tax credits, leveraging $698.3 million in private investment, enabling 173 projects. There are very few programs that give us that return on investment. We support the governor's proposal to increase the $3 million in annual tax credits for the Vermont Downtown and Village Tax Credit Program to $5 million. We have been wanting to do this for many years, and we're delighted this, we hope, will be the year. Section 2. Section 2 is long because here's where we address the small business supports that we want to see grown. This is expanding services for small business. This section invests in what works, supporting essential resources for economic development in Vermont. 93% of Vermont's businesses are considered small, employing less than 20 people. There are 27,204 businesses which fit this profile. These businesses employ 77,364 people, and they support $1.3 billion in wages. Most of these businesses are the lifeblood of our rural communities. And many of these businesses have benefited from the resources we're going to discuss, from the Vermont Small Business Development Center, the Vermont Small Business Legal Center, the Vermont Professionals of Color Network, the Micro Business Development Program, and the 5 community action partnerships, and the Sustainable Jobs Fund. These services help our small businesses succeed, improving their operations, giving them technical assistance, advice, and counsel on a range of essential business, legal, and succession planning practices. Improving business practices helps these small businesses grow and become more profitable, thus able to pay their employees better wages and benefits, and in turn, supporting the growth of Vermont's economy. There are 6 subsections, each dealing with another important resource designed to support our small businesses. Subsection A, 17 community partners funnel small businesses in need of legal advice to the Vermont Small Business Law Center. Founded in COVID, this legal clinic offers educational consults and in partnership with the Vermont Bar Association offers 10 hours of free legal advice to businesses with a range of needs from contracts, liability, intellectual property, regulatory, employment, entity formation, data privacy, to succession planning. The legal clinic has consulted with 160 businesses thus far and has made 35 presentations. But while the legal clinic is federally funded through June of 26, its intakes are exceeding current capacity. They are asking for $300,000 to meet demand, facilitate educational programming around new federal and state legislation, improve board trainings, business transactions, develop webinars, and create match funding opportunities. This ask supports an essential resource for growing businesses. Subsection B, Vermont Professionals of Color Network helps our BIPOC small business owners navigate resources available to them. It's proven track record of workforce and business development service for the BIPOC community, providing technical assistance, education on basic business practices, and networking to support just over 800 businesses. Their current 2-year contract with ACCD expires this April, and while $250,000 to continue this program is supported by the governor in the budget, we're asking for an additional $100,000 in one-time funds to enable them to increase the number of hours dedicated to supporting small business owners with all the resources they offer. Subsection C, since 1992, the Vermont Small Business Development Center has been an essential pillar of our small business community. It's Vermont's most trusted small business resource, helping Vermont entrepreneurs and business owners succeed. They provide no fee, one-on-one expert advice and counsel it's a confidential, individualized resource, and they help businesses through many stages of growth, from the very beginning right through to mid-size. They enable businesses to start, grow, and thrive, giving them access to market research, educational opportunities, and resources for all stages of development. A recent Economist survey determined that clients of VTSBDC have much greater increases in sales, 16% versus 3%, and employment, 21% over 1%, than the average business in Vermont. So it pays to go and take advantage of all these resources we have invested in. With a program cost of $1.1 million, the outcomes generated by advising 531 clients in 2024 were impressive. $10.7 million in new capital was obtained to start, grow, and operate Vermont businesses, and 25 new businesses were started, and 239 jobs were created, and at-risk jobs were retained. As Vermont's arm of the federal SBA, the Small Business Administration, it receives $777,000 from the feds and $388,000 from Vermont, which is in the governor's budget. However, we feel that the VTSBDC could effectively serve 200 more small businesses with another 1,200 consulting hours if they had additional support the additional support we asked for in this bill of $300,000. The next section creates a resource guide, which was one of the biggest needs identified at our joint hearing with small businesses. The 2021-23 Community Navigator Pilot Program identifies that centralized navigational services significantly improve entrepreneurs' ability to find and utilize business supports. And last year, the Small Business Technical Assistance Exchange showed us the power of coordinated resources and a strong demand for sustained collaborative infrastructure. The need for an info hub is clear. The goal is to reach over 27,000 small businesses, to increase resource utilization by 50%, to improve accessibility for historically excluded entrepreneurs, to create a sustainable infrastructure for ongoing collaboration, and to build a lasting technology-enabled support system for Vermont businesses. The $100,000 requested here is to create a standardized, reliable source of information in one resource guide, one go-to resource guide, available in a magazine-style publication and on an interactive website, complete with an AI-generated powered platform with aggregated, time-sensitive, up-to-date information. The next section, Section E, is the Micro Business Development Program provided by our community action partners. This is one, I have to say, one of my favorite programs. It supports the dreams of very low-income Vermonters and gives them the tools to start their own businesses. This is often the hand up needed to help move people out of poverty and into prosperity. The Micro Business Program has helped create more than 2,100 businesses. Switchback, of course, is the poster child for the Micro Business Program, but many of the property management, home health care, sewing, house cleaning, and repair businesses, which we rely on, got their start in this program. This bill asks us to invest an additional $87,000 over their ask, which is in the governor's budget, of $493,000 to expand their work and to start more life-changing Vermont businesses. And the last subsection in Section 2 addresses business owners who need more skills. And last, we want to invest $120,000 in coaching small business owners who often need to develop more skills to grow their businesses. This would provide skills training and coaching services over a 12 to 18-month period, individualized to suit the needs of the entrepreneur. Services that would be offered range from developing sales and marketing strategies to improving core operations, to management training, to succession planning. This coaching will be done by the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund in collaboration with the Vermont Manufacturing Extension Center. So the next sections really incorporate this next section. Section 3 addresses the Vermont Arts Council, our creative economy, and growing Vermont's film and creative media sector. Our committee, the Senate Economic Development Committee, has long supported Vermont's creative sector, and which contributes over $1.2 billion to the Vermont economy. It accounts for over 10,500 jobs, and its vitality is an essential element to Vermont's quality of life. In this section, we support the Vermont Arts Council requested appropriation of $1,071,800, the anticipated state match required by the National Endowment of the Arts, to draw down the federal match of the same amount. In FY24, the Arts Council awarded $3,247,415 in funding. Grants were awarded to 131 individuals, 235 organizations, and businesses in all 14 of our counties. Over the last 5 years, the Vermont Arts Council has been able to fund only 45% of the applications they receive, as there's always a greater demand for these resources than they have capacity to support. And at this point in my presentation, I would like to yield to the senator from Franklin. Thank you.
Senator from Windsor yields to the senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. This particular section of the bill refers to the work done by a film and media industry task force that the state created and was active in 2022 and 2023. Among the issues that we started with was the question, why are all the films that picture Vermont at Christmas time, with snow flying and beautiful scenery and pictures of people enjoying the weather, why are they always made someplace else and not in Vermont? And it suggests an opportunity because most states do, in fact, have some sort of a mechanism, call it a film commission or something else, that enables the film industry to gather together and to either provide that as an economic development venue, which film and media appears to be, or to use it as a tool to help advertise for their tourism. Why, for example, if you take a movie like White Christmas, why was that movie made in New York? If you remember the movie, the Netflix special, Wednesday, which was about the Addams family, the Addams family's daughter, that, again, was a movie set in Vermont, supposed to be made about many of the things that happened in Vermont, and it was set in the town of Jericho, Vermont. Except Jericho, Vermont was in Romania and not in Vermont. We created this film and media industry task force. It was appointed in 2022, held meetings through 2023. We looked at what other states were doing, both big states and also little states that didn't have a lot of money that we could use as a model. We looked at how successful they were and what the needs were, and we asked people throughout Vermont. We held 2 sessions, group sessions, designed to bring in people who were in the media industry in Vermont. We were overwhelmed because the number of people, we would have 200 people or plus at each of those meetings, people who are working in the film industry, based in Vermont, living in Vermont, but doing their work in New York, in Los Angeles, and elsewhere as needed. And one of the universal things we heard is we need to create some mechanism to bring those people together first. And we also need to be able to provide some tools that they could use. And the greatest tool was some sort of a database that tells them who else is in the industry in Vermont, so that if they are doing a work and they need to have a soundstage, they need to have camera people, they need to have casting directors and the like, those things could be found much more easily than they can right now. And so this particular provision is designed as a first step to look at how we can improve the opportunities for our media professionals in Vermont, how we can provide to the students. We have lots of students who are taking courses in media and film in Vermont, but they have no place to use their skill in Vermont on a commercial basis. And this is designed to at least take a first step. And that first step is to create a database and to manage it and to bring people together. The proposal in this particular bill is to create a database in fiscal 2026. It appropriates the sum of $120,000 from the general fund to the Vermont Arts Council for the purpose of supporting this media and industry task force, and to build and maintain an online database of film and creative media assets, and then to support a part-time staff position within the Arts Council to manage the database project and serve as the point of contact for film industry professionals. That point of contact, we found from all the states that we talked to, is the essential first step, is to have something and some place that people can call to get information about Vermont, and then hopefully the next time we have White Christmas, it won't be made in Romania or California or Canada. It'll be made here in Vermont. Thank you, Mr. President, and I would like to yield to the senator from Windsor.
Senator from Franklin yields to the senator from Windsor.
Thank you very much. Section 4 deals with another industry that all of us, I hope, partake in, the Vermont outdoor business sector. This economy has grown to over $2 billion economic engine, with over 16,000 that they count in their workforce. Its business alliance boasts 140 businesses and growing. This is a business sector that includes all outdoor recreation, from camping to skiing to mountain biking to manufacturing equipment to hunting and fishing. However, 58% of its businesses have been seriously impacted by both climate change and the natural disasters which climate change has produced. This year, VOBA, the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance, is asking for $250,000 to expand its training to help that target skills needed for high demand, highly skilled and high paying jobs with technical service and workforce development in occupations such as ski technicians, bike mechanics, and with occupations in gear and apparel manufacturing, trail construction, and outdoor facilities. It's all designed to help provide a technical assistance to build their business's climate resiliency and sustainability. With this investment, VOBA aims to serve 50 Vermont employers and 100 professionals. Section 5 expands Vermont's international trade opportunities for Asia and Europe. We have, this proposal builds on Vermont's very successful trade consultancy in Quebec, which we started 4 or 5 years ago, which has resulted in introducing more Vermont companies and trade into Canada and vice versa. For an additional investment of, $350,000, the International Trade Division at ACCD, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, hopes to hire a consultant to work in Asia and Europe to expand our trade opportunities for Vermont businesses and to recruit investment into Vermont. Sections 6 through 8 creates the Vermont-Ireland Trade Commission to advance bilateral trade and investment between Vermont and Ireland. Set up with the within the State Treasurer's Office, the Commission has 10 members who are appointed by a mix of the Governor, the Speaker, and the Senate Committee on Committees. The State Treasurer or designee is a member. Each member, aside from the Treasurer or designee, will serve a 4-year term. The Commission members receive standard per diems for attendance at meetings, and the Commission may meet up to 6 times a year and is authorized to raise private funds to defray its administrative expenses. It was very important to us to make sure that this was not viewed as a big perk, that you weren't going to get lots of free trips to Ireland, but that this be a working commission that was paid with our standard per diems and no additional particular side benefits. An annual report from the Commission is due to the General Assembly every year on its current activities, and the Commission is set up for repeal. It's sort of a pilot to see how it works in 2030. And I think it's an exciting, all these trade opportunities are exciting given what's happening federally. I think for us to take on our own, our ownership of some of this trade work is important at this point. Section 9, a major need addressed in our joint hearing was access to capital. And so this section asks the Agency of Commerce and Community Development to conduct a study and analyze the ways the state can better enable business growth and success and access capital in Vermont. While ACCD has a strong understanding of how to access capital, we want to establish what the state's role is in accessing capital and identify ways to offer investor education to high net worth individuals who are interested in investing in Vermont businesses. ACCD will submit a report to the General Assembly by November 1st of this year. And our last section, Section 10, creates the Convention Center and Performance Venue Task Force to study the feasibility of constructing a convention center and major performance venue in Vermont. Over the years, many have explored these economic development opportunities. And our hope is to bring all those parties who've invested time, energy, and RFPs in this dream and make some progress realizing a plan. The task force is made up of 6 members, including 2 legislators, the Secretary of ACCD or designee, the President of the Vermont Chamber of Commerce or designee, the Chief Executive Officer of the Lake Champlain Commerce or designee, and the President of the Regional Development Corporations or designee. The task force will determine the ability of the state to support these projects through various financial assistance, identify infrastructure improvements needed, and research the attributes of successful convention centers and performance venues recently developed in other states. We heard from many, many people and all the businesses who testified at our joint hearing, but particularly in committee, we heard from Senator Philip Baruth, the sponsor of our Vermont Ireland Trade Commission work, Ashlyn Doyen from the Secretary of the Office of the Treasurer, Ellen Kaler, the Executive Director of the Sustainable Jobs Fund, Nicole Killeran, the Director of the Small Business Law Center, Rick Sagel, our incredible legislative counsel, and Patrick Titterton, our super JFO liaison. The vote in our committee was 4-1. In supporting this bill, we are investing in what works, investing in growth for our over 27,000 small businesses so that they can produce more, invent more, sell more, and employ more at better wages. What helps our people and businesses grow and flourish is good for Vermont's economy, good for our tax revenues, and, well, good for Vermont. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator from Windsor. I'd like to recognize the Senator from Franklin, Senator Brock, for the report of the Committee on Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance reviewed this bill. There was one section that had an effect on the revenues of the state, and that's Section 1, the Downtown and Village Center Tax Credit Program, a program that's been around for quite a number of years, I think since fiscal 10. It increases the amount available in this program annually from $3 million to $5 million. The program has been incredibly successful, and it also has been oversubscribed on every potential, in every year that we've had the potential to provide these credits for the use of improving our downtowns. Facade credits are also involved, and these are combined with the program that the federal government has to do the same thing. We always leave with more people asking for these credits than are available, and we recommend that this particular section stay as is, and we recommend the bill favorably to the Senate, and we ask for your support. The vote in the Economic Development, or rather in the Finance Committee, was 7-0-0. Thank you, President.
Thank you, Senator from Franklin. I'd like to recognize the Senator from Washington, Senator Perchlik, for the report of the Committee on Appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Appropriations reviewed the bill for any appropriations, as is our custom. Whenever we found an appropriation, we struck that out. So you'll see in the calendar on page 486 our amendment. Although in talking about this amendment today, we have one other section, which was a tax credit, the downtown tax credit that the Senator from Windsor had reported on, is an expenditure in that it's a tax expenditure. So I would like to move that we issue a substitute amendment for the amendment that's in the calendar that we passed out.
And the substitute amendment is being passed out at the moment. Feel free to proceed.
I didn't know if we had to vote on the move to do the substitute amendment, or do I do the substitute amendment?
The question then is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations as offered in the substitute amendment? I skipped a step. Shall the report of the Committee on Appropriations be substituted as represented in the amendment before you? Is everyone ready for that question? If so, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have substituted the amendment for what appears in the calendar. With that, I'll turn to the senator from Washington for the report of the amendment.
So the Committee on Appropriations appreciates the good work of the Economic Development Committee. This is needed work on our economic and workforce development, but without malice, we are proposing in this amendment to strike all the expenditures and appropriations that are in the bill. So the first instance of amendment is to strike sections 1 through 5. That's, you can see them in the calendar, all those sections: the International Trade Office, the Outdoor Business Sector, the Arts Council, the Small Business Support, and what we just added with the substitute amendment, the expansion of $2 million on the downtown tax credit. The second instance of amendment is to I guess I should say the first 5 sections that we struck, we have contingent language. So you'll see that in the amendment where it says it's just contingent on the appropriation. So the language would still be there because some of these programs are ongoing. We're not trying to strike the program. We're just saying if there's no money, then the duty to implement those is not there. Only if in the budget do we add that money, will those have to be put into effect. The second and third instances of amendment are different, that we're just striking sections of those, parts of those sections that have expenditures. So second instance of amendment is section 6, which is the Vermont Ireland Trade Commission. And we just are striking the subsection H, which is the payment to legislators. So if we don't put the money in the bill, in the big bill, legislators could still be on that commission, they just wouldn't be getting the per diem. And then in section 10, we're striking subsection D, which is also the compensation and reimbursement of those that would be on the convention center and performance venue task force. The vote in committee was 601 on the original amendment. Just a straw poll on the floor here, 700 for the substitute amendment. And I ask for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations as offered in the substitution? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we have amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Appropriations as offered in the substitution. We have. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire the reporter of the underlying bill?
The reporter is interrogated.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I got all of this captured, but I may not. Totally in support of the bill. On page 8, in terms of the Vermont Ireland Trade Commission, is outlined the terms of being on the commission. 3 members, except for the state treasurer, I'm now on line 16, shall be appointed for terms of 4 years each. And then later in that section, 3 members appointed by the governor shall serve initial terms of 2 years each, and 3 members of the appointed by the speaker would serve initial terms of 3 years each. There's no mention about the Committee on Committees appointments. And so I'm assuming, because further up that page, I'm assuming they would serve a 4-year term initially. And the initial appointments would be made in October of 25, and the whole commission is repealed in June of 30. So in essence, well, first, I guess, Mr. President, if I could ask whether I have that part of it correct.
I believe you do.
Thank you. So the second question I guess I have, even if they were reappointed for a second term, the commission would cease to exist before those terms had expired. Is that also correct?
That's correct.
Oh, it's wonderful that I actually got all that organized in my mind. Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the Senator.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I really would like to support this bill, and I have talked to the bill's sponsor. I like it a lot better now that we've taken out all the appropriations. we are going to find ourselves in a situation where we just don't have enough money to meet all of the needs of our state, especially given the situation at the federal level. And this bill spends a lot of money. And even though we've taken out the appropriations, we still are leaving in all of the language about the appropriations, and it's very concerning to me. But I do have some specific questions if I could inquire of the reporter of the bill.
Senator from Windsor is interrogated.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the specific, the funding that goes to the Arts Council, there is a note about, and actually this might be not your section of the bill now that I have you standing, but there's a note about the federal money, that this is part of a federal match. And I believe a bunch of federal money for arts and history and libraries was just revoked from the federal government. Do you know if this is part of that revocation of federal funding, or if this is still relevant to this?
I believe it's relevant. I have not heard, and I've been in touch with the executive director of the Arts Council. This is, as far as I know, still on track, and I will actually touch base with her today. But every year, we are required, every state is required to do a dollar for dollar match with the federal appropriation. So this is the anticipated federal appropriation. It's in the governor's budget. It would be, it's always has been honored.
Okay.
And so we have always matched it dollar for dollar. And we will see what that ends up being, and we probably won't know that for the next little bit.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. And then further on, the Vermont Ireland Trade Commission, this is, I do appreciate the changes that you've made to this compared to where this proposal was last year. But I wonder why the committee felt that 10 members were required for this task, and why 6 of these 10 members are legislators. That just seems like setting up a commission for legislators to, get free trips to Ireland, and that's very concerning to me. It seems to me if we're going to set up a trade commission, should be with people who know something about the topic. There's no requirement that these legislators have any specific expertise. So why is it that a 10-member panel seemed necessary with 6 of them being legislators?
This is what the proposal entailed. And it's not anticipated that they go to Ireland. I mean, they certainly aren't going to Ireland on the per diems we're paid. So they hopefully will be members from our committees of commerce and Senate Economic Development who are committed to working on how we can improve our bilateral trade with Ireland. And we did not discuss reducing the number. And as we know, all our bills are an evolving conversation, and this is always something that the House could address.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned that this would be our first such trade commission. Do we have a trade commission with Canada, which is our largest trade partner?
I don't believe we do. We have a trade office in Quebec, I do not believe we have a formal U.S.-Canada Vermont Canada Trade Commission, but I will double check that but I'm not sure that we do.
Okay, we do have in our department or agency of commerce, we do have an Office of International Trade or something like that, correct?
Absolutely.
Did they recommend setting this up with Ireland? Did this come out of any kind of conversation with them about how Ireland would be a good choice? Because we have relationships with other countries, for example, through our National Guard, a strong relationship with Austria, through our sister state program, a strong relationship with Japan. And I'm wondering, was it just that Ireland asked, or was there a recommendation from anyone in Vermont that this would be a valuable partnership to start with as our first one?
I think all of the above. I think Ireland did ask, and I think there are ongoing efforts to establish trade commissions, particularly with other New England states in Taiwan. And we absolutely, I think we need to see how these work. And this is certainly a pilot to see how this might work. And I think we're open, as I said in my remarks, particularly given what's happening in Washington for the next 4 years, we may well want to be establishing our own trade commissions.
Mm-hmm. And then the convention center task force, again, what was the thought about having legislators on that? Was that a necessary, why was that thought to be necessary?
Oh, I think legislators are going to be the ones carrying the water and helping finance it and supporting it here in terms of any kind of appropriation it would get from the state. And I think it's important for us to help own moving this along and be part of the conversation. I think that it will come back to us, and I think that we need to be informed and have advocates for it embedded in our members.
Okay, I thank the presenter, and Mr. President, may I inquire of the other presenter on the film and media section of the bill, please?
The presenter from Franklin County is interrogated.
Thank you, Mr. President. You and I discussed this a little bit in committee, but the section on the film and media database, I have some knowledge indirectly or fairly directly actually of the film and media industry in Vermont. And it is largely not sort of Hollywood focused kind of commercial film and media culture and film and media industry in Vermont. It's much more focused on small projects, documentaries, short films, homegrown types of films made by filmmakers here, education and higher education, and also film festivals. And with this database, how would this database help that kind of, because that's really what the film and media industry is like in Vermont. So how would this database help them?
Well, I think there are two answers, Mr. President, to that question. The first is this may be, to some extent, the way the film industry is in Vermont today. But this focus on the industry is looking at tomorrow as well. The issue is growing a film and media industry in Vermont from where it is today. We recognize that we are not the state that will be able to offer the kinds of multi-zillion-dollar payments to filmmakers that some other states are doing right now to attract them. But we have other opportunities in that we have an awful lot of people, a large number of people in Vermont who are in the industry in various ways. We have people who are serving the small film industry, and that is right now largely the cornerstone of filmmaking in Vermont. But we also have a number of people who are involved in major motion pictures, typically elsewhere, who are involved in everything from casting to other kinds of production activities to writing and the like. We want to create a database and an opportunity for filmmakers throughout. And that database, even though a person may be making a private, relatively small film, still may need some of the skills of people in the database who largely work in the industry elsewhere, but who are based here. So this is to open a door to all filmmakers, and we have a variety of people who do a variety of things in a variety of places. And this is, again, to open that door to make things available to all of them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. I thank the presenter of the bill. I continue to have concerns with this bill. I might offer an amendment on third reading, but thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Windsor.
I'd like to respond to and correct myself, which is that the legislators that are being asked to be appointed to the Trade Commission are not, in fact, do not have to be legislators. They are simply 3 members identified by the speaker and by the Committee on Committees who would probably have strong business, trade, and international experience. So they don't need to be legislators. They just need to be hopefully informed and thoughtful.
Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. I simply rise to offer some comments regarding the trade portion of the bill. This state does have a commission on international trade and state sovereignty that was quite active until the pandemic. I happen to chair that commission as a statewide commission with business, legislative, and other representation. And I think that currently the chair of economic development is chair of that commission on international trade and state sovereignty. I will say that the benefit of having a bilateral agreement between the state of Vermont and a country such as Ireland is to enhance our dairy industry, our cheese production, and other trade items that might benefit both countries. The other very important thing to consider with this is that under the World Trade Organization and the organization that is led by our United States Trade Representative, we may be subject to some provisions that are probably not welcome in the state when decisions are made about bilateral or multilateral trade arrangements across the globe. In our state, for example, we've had experience in intervening in the Australian Annex 2B provision that would have rendered any decisions at the federal level around Medicare drugs impotent. And so I think that leaving ourselves to be held hostage by federal trade agreements might be unfortunate. There might be some benefit, but in the past we haven't seen that for our state. So I very much think that this is a good step forward for the state of Vermont and for our business, for our regulations. Simply because at the federal level, our regulations, state subdivisional regulations, state level regulations can be ignored and not followed when decisions are made in trade agreements. So there's a great deal here embedded underneath this proposal, and I think it's really important that we adhere to it. I do have other stories that are exciting about what we have done with our Commission on Trade and State Sovereignty, some national perspective that we've taken to national meetings and intervened in areas that might have caused harm to our state and other states. I will say that I do think it's great to have legislators on the proposed committee. And I also think that we have to be careful about who we select there. I know committees and committees will make a good selection. There are some folks that have Irish names, and I won't name anyone in particular, but they certainly might lend themselves to an interest. So thank you, Mr. President, for the indulgence.
Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. In reference to the Ireland Trade Commission, that language did come out of an effort in the House last year. And we did have a representative from Ireland, a senator from Ireland, who came over and spoke with many lawmakers in the building. I was one of that group. And we all found it an exciting possibility for new markets, especially for our dairy products. I did want to speak to the misapprehension, I think, that there would be lavish trips involved with this. The senator who came over made it clear that they were eager for friendship and we were welcome in Ireland at any time, but they would not be paying for anyone to fly over to Ireland. They did promise a pint for anybody who came over, but that was the extent of it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a cautionary tale. Once upon a time, before even my time in this body, there was a well-known actor that made a movie in Vermont. And at some point, and we were going through some very difficult financial times. And at that point, there were some stories about how much said, well-known, well-liked actor was being paid for his work in Vermont. And there was a certain amount of outrage that anyone could make this much money and Vermonters weren't. And so we passed a bill, I believe it is and it's a fairly standard one, but the bill that says if you are an out-of-state resident, but you earn money while you're working in Vermont, you owe the state of Vermont income tax on that money, which is law of the land. I think most states do it, if not all right now. But when we did it, it was seen as being aimed at one actor and kind of a jealousy thing. And the Vermont Film Commission has been through the Finance Committee more than once because it's involved tax credits. And what we have been told is the result of that one kind of the timing, we were essentially blackballed in Hollywood. And so we have a lot to make up for. And I think we also need to be very cognizant when we start to talk about certain people or certain groups of people. We could get a negative reaction.
Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? If so, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have ordered third reading of S 122. We now have S 125, introduced by the Committee on Economic Development on March 18, 2025. Affecting the appropriations of the state, the bill was referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which recommends that the bill be amended, and when so amended, that the bill ought to pass. Listen to the second reading of the bill.
S 125, an act relating to workers' compensation and collective bargaining rights.
Recognize the senator from Chittenden, Senator Ram Hinsdale, for the explanation of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. S 125 is an important and balanced bill that strengthens both workers' compensation protections and collective bargaining rights in Vermont. This bill is the product of careful work by the Senate Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs, and I will now walk the body through its key provisions, advancing real tangible needs for working Vermonters. First, S 125 makes important updates to our workers' compensation system to ensure fairness and dignity for injured workers. The workers' compensation system in Vermont is over a century old. It is considered a grand bargain whereby employees give up the right to sue their employers for workplace injuries in exchange for no-fault compensation for such injuries. The system provides workers that have been found to have been injured on the job with wage replacement at 2/3 of their average weekly wage, medical benefits for their injury, and vocational rehabilitation as needed. The Vermont Department of Labor adjudicates disputes that may arise during this process, and our body of workers' compensation laws have worked to define the rights and responsibilities of injured workers, their employers, and the insurance companies that pay out workers' compensation benefits. From time to time, the legislature works to update our workers' comp laws to ensure fairness and maintenance of the spirit of this grand bargain. In Section 1, we update the statute around medical case management. This refers to the planning and coordination of healthcare services between the injured worker, their family, and their providers. The goal here is simple: empower injured workers to make informed choices about their care. Medical case managers do not provide direct medical treatment, nor do they make decisions about claim approval. Instead, they serve as an advocate and resource for workers navigating a complex medical system. Section 3 builds on this by allowing workers themselves, not just insurance carriers, to request medical case management services. It establishes a clear process if that request is denied and ensures that workers have the right to appeal through the Department of Labor. This shift brings more balance and agency to injured workers who often feel overwhelmed and underrepresented in these situations. Section 2 tackles another fundamental issue, language access. It requires employers to provide translation services when an injured worker doesn't speak English fluently. This is about basic fairness. No worker should miss critical information about their health, their rights, or their compensation because of a language barrier. Section 4 strengthens accountability by creating a sliding scale of penalties for late wage replacement payment. Currently, we have a flat penalty of $10 or 5%, whichever is greater. Under S-125, that increases to 10% for a second late payment and 15% for a third and beyond. Timely payments are not optional. They are a lifeline for injured workers and their families. Now let me turn to the collective bargaining provisions in the bill. Section 5 takes a meaningful step forward for labor rights in Vermont's judiciary. It allows supervisors in the judicial branch who are currently barred from organizing to unionize if they so choose. This reflects the reality that all employees, including supervisors, deserve a voice in the workplace and the opportunity to bargain collectively. Section 6 recognizes that if we are going to uphold and enforce labor laws, we must give our institutions the capacity to do so. It appropriates $250,000 from the general fund to the Vermont Labor Relations Board to increase its staffing. Right now, the board is operating with just 1.5 employees, an executive director, and a part-time clerk. That is not sustainable given the growing caseload and the complexity of labor relations in our state. This investment is modest but essential. And I'll just add some additional context now. This is where you will see a amendment without malice from your Committee on Appropriations related to this particular expenditure. I want to be clear that Judith Dillon, the Executive Director of the Labor Relations Board, did not make this request for additional funding. It was made clear to us through some of our task forces over the summer and some of our hearing about some delays in the process, that Judith Dillon is diligent and hardworking and essentially serves as the chief bottle washer of the Vermont Labor Relations Board. Her duties include being the administrator, the general counsel, the hearing recorder, the records officer, the scheduler, the investigator, and performer of most other duties associated with the VLRB, including website updates. So in order to help our Vermont Labor Relations Board function better, your Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs feels this is an important appropriation to be fully considered by your Appropriations Committee in the budget. Finally, Section 7 provides that S-125 will take effect on July 1st of 2025. Mr. President, your Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs heard from our Legislative Counsel, and I'd like to thank Sophie Zadatny for her work on a number of labor bills as being new to Leg Council and new to helping us write areas of statute in this regard. She did an excellent job. We heard from local labor attorneys. We heard from representatives of the insurance industry, the Vermont Labor Relations Board, the Vermont State Employees Association, and the Vermont Department of Labor, which is neutral on this bill. S-125 is about ensuring our systems work better for workers, for employers, and for the state. It strengthens fairness, accountability, and efficiency. It centers the voices of injured workers and those who seek to collectively bargain. And it reflects Vermont's ongoing commitment to leading with compassion, balance, and common sense. Your vote out of committee was 5-0-0, and I urge the body's support. Thank you.
I now recognize the senator from Washington, Senator Watson, for the report on the Committee of Appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Indeed, without malice, the Senate Appropriations Committee voted to remove Section 6, which is about the appropriation associated with staffing, and that vote was 7-0-0.
So the question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden.
Mr. President, I meant to add, just to demystify our process a little bit, that given the fast pace of last week, 3 members of your Economic Development Committee have an amendment that will be coming tomorrow on third reading that has to do with election decertification in bargaining agreements and certified payroll for prevailing wage projects. And I wanted to give members that preview because it will be in the Senate calendar. So you have the opportunity to take a look and ask myself or members of our committee questions before we get to the floor of a clarifying nature, if you'd like.
So the question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the bill as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of S 125. We now have on the calendar for action S 18, introduced January 22nd, 2025. It was referred to the Committee on Health and Welfare, which reports it has considered the bill and recommends that the bill be amended as set forth in the calendar for today on page 487, and that when so amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill was then referred to the Committee on Finance, which reports it has considered the bill and recommends that the bill ought to pass. The bill was then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which reports it has considered the bill and recommends that the bill ought to pass. Listen to the second reading of the bill.
S 18, an act relating to licensure of freestanding birth centers.
I recognize the senator from Chittenden, Senator Gulick, for the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare.
Thank you, Mr. President. S 18 is a bill regarding the licensure of freestanding birth centers. And yes, you can find it on page 487 in the calendar. First of all, what is a birth center? A freestanding birth center is a healthcare facility for childbirth where care is provided in the midwifery and wellness model. It's not a hospital, and it feels more homey than a medical facility. Birth centers are run typically by licensed midwives, certified nurse midwives, and licensed midwives. Both of these professions already have full licensure and ability to practice home birth and hospital birth in the great state of Vermont. And folks who choose a birth center may also receive prenatal and postnatal care as well from the providers who work there. Freestanding birth centers are a well-established and highly recommended model of care for pregnant people. The White House blueprint for addressing the maternal health crisis cites increasing free centers as an important action item. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine all endorse the birth center model of care as a safe and evidence-based option for low-risk people. Birth centers are a way to improve access and quality of care. They give pregnant individuals the option, certainly not the requirement, but the option to give birth in a facility that may not be their home, but that is also not a hospital. We are one of only a few states in the United States that doesn't allow for freestanding birth centers. Not having a freestanding birth center is actually resulting in the loss of workforce. And that is because all of our neighboring states have freestanding birth centers, and many of our midwives and healthcare professionals leave the state to go work in those highly desirable environments. And the other issue with that is that birthing people are also leaving the state. As I'll talk about in a little bit, when you look at the data, you can see that especially our cities and towns that are close to our neighboring states, you see that birthing folks are leaving to use birthing centers in other states. Birthing centers provide a low-cost option to folks and will certainly save Medicaid money. Our largest insurance company, Blue Cross Blue Shield, sent me a nice memo that showed that the average cost of a vaginal birth at UVMMC is $17,100. as opposed to at a freestanding birthing center, 2,870. So you can see the opportunity for savings there. Some claim that freestanding birth centers threaten the financial well-being of hospital maternity units. There is no evidence that this is true, and birthing centers really work in cooperation with local hospitals and sometimes even increase flow to hospitals. If you really want to dig into the data, what I would recommend to you is that you look at the 2020 vital statistics from the Agency of Human Services. There you can see, for example, I like to use Brattleboro as an example, Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, and you can see that they did 173 deliveries in 2022 within their local area, with a total of 271 deliveries. But then if you expand out and you look at their entire catchment area, there were 323 births, meaning that 150 deliveries for people living within their catchment area decided to go elsewhere. Another way of saying this is that they did about 53% of the births that were possible within their catchment area. So again, as I said earlier, folks are leaving the state to go give birth in other birthing centers in other states. They're choosing home births, for example, as well. And this was really compelling for our committee when we heard that data. Birth centers, as I said, would likely not take births out of the hospital, but would recapture those going out of state and those giving birth at home. So let's look at it section by section very quickly, because I know time is of the essence. So we're talking about the licensure of birth centers. The first several chapters are dealing with, or sections, the definitions, the license portion, and the prohibitions. The application fee, which is going to be $250 for the initial licensure and the renewal and change of ownership. The licensing requirements, which will direct the Department of Health to issue license if the department finds the applicant is able to operate a birth center in accordance with the board rules. Then you've got section 2355, which talks about the revocation of licensing and the hearing that would happen if there was going to be a revocation. You have an appeal process in 2356. You've got the inspections that will be done by the Department of Health in 2357. And then you've got records which address confidentiality of information that the department will receive from birth centers. And then you've got in 2359 the rules, which the Department of Health will adopt rules for birth centers. In 2360, you see that there is no effect on the scope of services. Nurse midwives are already covered by health insurance. And 4099D, where we talk about midwifery coverage and home births, it requires health insurance coverage for prenatal, maternity, postpartum, and newborn services provided at a licensed birthing center, including the facility fees. But again, there's no change in scope here. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Section 3 is important because it talks about this certificate of need. And what this bill is asking for is an exemption from certificate of need. Why that is that birthing centers are not big money makers. They are often a labor of love. They struggle to move forward if they have to deal with the onerous process of certificate of need as well as the costs involved. So this bill asks for an exemption from CON. As you may know, there are going to be some bills probably coming our way that will be raising the threshold for certificate of need, which would certainly help, but this really is going to make it possible for a birth center to open. Section 4 talks about getting federal approval for our plan amendment. The Agency of Human Services will be doing that. And then section 5 is effective dates. We heard from many people We heard from Jen Alleman, who is the project director at the American Associations of Birth Centers, Carolyn Barnwell, who's the chief operating officer of Italia Ledge Council. We heard from Timothy Fisher, who is at the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology in UMass, Bay State Medical Center. Lori Foster, a legislative liaison for the Vermont affiliate of the American College of Nurse Midwives. Devin Green, who is with VAHS, Vermont Association of Hospitals and Health Systems. Me. Lindsay LaChan, who's a nurse midwife. We heard from General Counsel for the Vermont Department of Health. Shayla Livingston, who's a member of the Vermont Birth Center Coalition. Lauren McAfee, who's a board member of the Vermont Medical Society. We heard from Rin Manville, who's a nurse midwife at Copley Hospital. Alex McCracken from DIVA. Peter Stewart, who is an obstetrics and gynecology resident at North Country Hospital. And Gail Zatz, who's a member of the Birth Center Coalition. In conclusion, I just want to say we're working so hard in health and welfare with the leadership from my committee chair, from our committee chair, to make meaningful change in our healthcare system by increasing quality care, expanding access, all while reducing costs by providing care close to home and making that care less invasive and intense. The vote out of our committee was 5-0-0, favorable, and we ask for the Senate to concur. Thank you, Mr. President.
I now recognize once again the senator from Chittenden, Senator Gulick, for the report of the Committee on Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance heard from Legislative Counsel, Joint Fiscal, and again, Shayla Livingston with the Vermont Birth Center Coalition. We found that the $250 fee to be very appropriate, and we voted this out of committee favorably 7-0-0. Thank you, Mr. President.
I now recognize the senator from Lamoille, Senator Westman, for the report of the Committee on Appropriations.
The Appropriations Committee reviewed the bill. There was money items in sections 1, 2, and 4. The $200 will go for the licensing. And from Joint Fiscal's point of view, they anticipate that this will have a nominal effect on anything, and it will depend on how many applicants there are. What was more important for our committee is, in the long range, the anticipation is that this could be a cost reduction and would have a favorable effect in Medicaid for the costs of births. We were in favor of this 7-0-0.
So the question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Health and Welfare? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the bill as recommended by the Committee on Health and Welfare. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of S-18. We now have JRH3, Joint Resolution authorizing the Green Mountain Boys State and Green Mountain Girls State educational programs to use the Senate House facilities on June 26th of 2025. The resolution has been read and set forth in yesterday's journal, which is before you. The question is, shall the Senate adopt the joint House resolution in concurrence? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have adopted the joint House resolution in concurrence. That completes the orders of the day. Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending announcements, I would move that the Senate stand in adjournment until 1 p.m. Wednesday, March 26th.
Are there any announcements? Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask that the Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs Committee gather in committee for 10 minutes because we do need to discuss tomorrow's housing presentation. And, but I'm afraid that most of what we had planned for this morning has gone by the way, and so we'll reconfigure everything. But if the committee could join us, that would be great.
Are there any other announcements? Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet at 1:30.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Appropriations will meet at 1 o'clock.
Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Health and Welfare will meet very briefly at the Fall of the Gavel downstairs.
Senator from Bennington.
President, the Senate Education Committee will be adjourned.
Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Government operations will meet at 1:30.
Senator from Wyndham.
Senate Judiciary will not be meeting today.
Senator from Wyndham.
Institutions will meet at 1.
Are there any more announcements? Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Natural Resources Energy will also not be meeting this morning.
Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Agriculture will meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
Are there any more announcements? Seeing none, the senator from Chittenden has moved that we adjourn until 1 p.m. Wednesday, March 26, 2025. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we've adjourned till 1 o'clock p.m. Wednesday, March 20th, 2025.